समृद्ध एवं बृहद संस्कृत विभाग में आज के इस कार्यक्रम में आप सभी का स्वागत है। सुप्रभातम। आज हम लोग एक ऐतिहासिक घटना के साक्षी होने जा रहे हैं। श्री राजीव मल्होत्रा की पुस्तक द बैटल फॉर संस्कृत के विमोचन एवं उसके परिचर्चा में हम लोग भाग ले रहे हैं। मैं सबसे पहले निवेदन करूंगा अपने विभाग की वरिष्ठ आचार्य प्रोफेसर शारदा शर्मा जी से कि वो आदरणीय मंत्री महोदया का पुष्पगुच्छ से स्वागत करें। हमारे दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय के आर्ट्स फैकल्टी की डीन प्रोफेसर मिनी साहनी जी मिनिस्टर मैडम का शॉल द्वारा स्वागत करेंगे। प्रोफेसर मिनी साहनी स्पेनिश की प्रोफेसर हैं और हमारे फैकल्टी ऑफ आर्ट्स की डीन रहे हैं। अरबिक डिपार्टमेंट के प्रोफेसर हसनैन अख्तर पुष्पगुच्छ के द्वारा श्री राजीव मल्होत्रा का स्वागत करेंगे। विभाग के आचार्य प्रोफेसर सत्यपाल सिंह जी शॉल द्वारा राजीव मल्होत्रा जी का स्वागत करेंगे। इंडियन काउंसिल फॉर फिलोसॉफिकल रिसर्च के प्रेसिडेंट दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय के प्रोफेसर अमेरिटस प्रोफेसर एस.आर. भट्ट का स्वागत हमारे युवा प्राध्यापक नेता थे सुनील शर्मा जी पुष्पगुच्छ द्वारा करेंगे। बेल्जियम के महान भारत विद्याविद प्रोफेसर एल्स का स्वागत हमारे टूटा के सेक्रेटरी श्री संदीप जी पुष्पगुच्छ द्वारा करेंगे। प्रोफेसर एल्स की किताबें मुख्य रूप से आर्यन थ्योरी के खंडन में बहुत प्रसिद्ध है और आप बहुत बड़े स्कॉलर हैं और इस कार्यक्रम के लिए राजीव जी की पुस्तक के लिए विशेष रूप से बेल्जियम से आए हैं। हमारे विभाग की प्रोफेसर शशि तिवारी जी प्रोफेसर टी.एस. सत्यनाथ जी का स्वागत करेंगी पुष्पगुच्छ द्वारा। प्रोफेसर टी.एस. सत्यनाथ दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय में कन्नड़ के प्रोफेसर रहे हैं और दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी में जो कंपेरेटिव इंडियन लिटरेचर का बहुत बड़ा सेंटर है उसके फाउंडर मेंबर्स प्रोफेसर टी.एस. सत्यनाथ। अधिक न बोलते हुए मैं इस पुस्तक के विषय में जानकारी देने के लिए श्री राजीव मल्होत्रा जी को आमंत्रित करता हूँ।
आइडिया इन दिस बुक इस की जो संस्कृत और संस्कृति और संस्कृत जुड़े हुए हैं, सेपरेट नहीं हो सकते। और संस्कृत और संस्कृति के जो इनसाइडर्स हैं, जो प्रैक्टिस करते हैं, जिनका स्वधर्म है, जिनकी साधना है, संस्कृत से जुड़ी है, संस्कृति से जुड़ी है, जिनकी हेरिटेज है, उनको हम इनसाइडर्स कहलाते हैं। और जो विदेशी हैं, जो विदेशी दृष्टि से देखते हैं, वो सिर्फ अमेरिकन और यूरोपियन नहीं है, बहुत सारे लाखों इंडियंस भी विदेशी दृष्टि से देखते हैं। तो वो भी विदेशी इंडोलॉजी में काम कर रहे हैं और जो इनसाइडर्स हैं वो स्वदेशी इंडोलॉजी में काम कर रहे हैं। तो इनमें क्या अंतर है, क्या डिबेट है, क्या टेंशन है, इसके बारे में पुस्तक लिखी है। और अब इस जमाने में जो विदेशी इंडोलॉजिस्ट हैं उन्हीं का कंट्रोल है, क्योंकि ज़्यादातर जर्नल्स, ज़्यादातर कॉन्फ्रेंसेस, जहाँ से बहुत टॉप प्रेस्टीज की यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में पीएचडी मिलती हैं और जो एकेडमिक बुक्स लिखते हैं, वो ज़्यादातर उनके कंट्रोल में है, जो पैनल्स हैं, एडिटोरियल बोर्ड्स हैं, इस तरह से। और हम चाहते हैं कि ये जो अधिकार है ये वापस भारत में आए और जो भारतीय संस्कृति से जुड़े हुए हैं उनके हाथों में हो। इसके लिए हमने पिछले 3 हफ्ते काफ़ी टूर किया बुक के बारे में और काफ़ी सपोर्ट मिली। जो ट्रेडिशनल मठ के लोग हैं, जैसे कांची शंकराचार्य जी ने सपोर्ट दी, और कई अपने आश्रम के, जैसे श्री श्री रविशंकर ने बुक को लॉन्च किया, चिन्मय मिशन ने किया, माता अमृतानंद यूनिवर्सिटी ने किया। इस तरह काफ़ी अपने जो ट्रेडिशनल लोग हैं उन्होंने भी सपोर्ट दी। और जो ट्रेडिशनल संस्कृत स्कॉलर्स हैं, ये कर्नाटका संस्कृत यूनिवर्सिटी है, एक जो चेन्नई में बड़ी फेमस संस्कृत यूनिवर्सिटी है, इस तरह जो संस्कृत विद्यालय, जो संस्कृत शास्त्र पढ़ने वाले स्कॉलर टाइप हैं, जो एक तो है जो प्रैक्टिशनर हैं, जो आश्रम में हैं, जो पीठम्स में हैं, एक है जो इंटेलेक्चुअल एकेडमिक तरीके से स्कॉलरशिप करते हैं ट्रेडिशनल तरीके से, उनसे भी बहुत सपोर्ट मिली। और इस बुक का ये हमारा प्रोग्राम ये है, स्ट्रेटजी ये है कि हम जो ट्रेडिशनल संस्कृत स्कॉलर्स हैं उनको इकट्ठा करें, उनकी आवाज़ को इकट्ठा करें, उनको सपोर्ट दें, और जो विदेशी इंडोलॉजिस्ट हैं उनके बारे में हम चर्चा करें, उन पर हम पूर्व पक्ष करें कि ये लोग क्या कह रहे हैं। क्योंकि जो पूर्व पक्ष की ट्रेडिशन है, तो हमारी बहुत पहले की ट्रेडिशन है, उसको हम दोबारा शुरू करना चाहते हैं। पहले ज़माने में बुद्धिस्ट के बारे में पूर्व पक्ष था, पूर्व मीमांसा के बारे में, सांख्या के बारे में, चार्वाक के बारे में, इस तरह। आजकल के ज़माने में तो वेस्टर्न इंडोलॉजिस्ट के ही ज़्यादा पूर्व पक्ष होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि ज़्यादा तो कंट्रोल उन्हीं का है। इस ज़माने में पुराने ज़माने के लोगों के बारे में पूर्व पक्ष का इतना फायदा नहीं जितना आजकल के ज़माने के जो लोग हैं तो उनके बारे में पूर्व पक्ष होनी चाहिए। लेकिन ये पूर्व पक्ष नहीं हो रही, ये हमारे ट्रेडिशनल स्कॉलर्स इस तरह की पूर्व पक्ष नहीं कर रहे। तो इसी को इनकरेज करने के लिए हमने ये इनसाइडर्स वर्सेस आउटसाइडर्स ये पुस्तक लिखी है। और आई एम वेरी डिलाइटेड टू बी ऑनर्ड हियर बाय डिस्टिंग्विश्ड persons. Very happy that the Honorable Minister of Minority Affairs is here. And the one point that people keep asking, those who are on the opposite side, and I'm glad that the Minority Affairs Minister is here to support me, I think, because people keep asking, isn't Sanskrit a language of the elite? ऐसे बोलते हैं, isn't Sanskrit the language of the elite and not the average person, not the minorities? And of course that is not true. In my book there is plenty of evidence I have given that Sanskrit has been a language of Aam Aadmi. Sanskrit has been a common person's language, because Sanskrit में नाटक है, संस्कृत में काव्य है. The person who is writing kavya is not writing for himself, he is writing for the public. And the people who are performing Natashastra, all the performances, and Sanskrit's got lakhs of these dances, these dramas and poetries and so on. These are not being performed by the person who is writing the natak, it's being performed for the public. So public must know Sanskrit in order to be able to enjoy these. So the mere existence of so much popular literature, not Vedas only, which you can say, okay, maybe for very high-flown people who are very, learned. But I'm talking about things written for common. The content is very common man content, popular level content. That shows the existence of popular spoken Sanskrit for a long time. So it is not a elitist kind of thing. It has been seen in that way in recent centuries, but was not seen in that way for a very long time. So I'm happy that the Minorities Affairs Minister is here, because it's very symbolic, very, very symbolic to have support from her. So with this I will conclude, and later I will give more details about my book. Dhanyavad.
आज के इस कार्यक्रम में केवल संस्कृत के फैकल्टी ही नहीं है, पर्शियन के है प्रोफेसर चंद्रशेखर, जर्मन डिपार्टमेंट से प्रोफेसर कुसुम ग्रवाल जी, और साइकोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट, साइंस डिपार्टमेंट, सबसे जो लोग सब आए हैं उन सबका स्वागत है। और इस कार्यक्रम को विधिवत शुरू करने के लिए मैं रंजन त्रिपाठी जी से अनुरोध करूंगा कि हमारे आज के अध्यक्ष प्रोफेसर अशोक बोरा जी का स्वागत करें। प्रोफेसर अशोक बोरा दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी फिलोसफी डिपार्टमेंट में हेड रहे हैं, एमरिटस प्रोफेसर है दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी के, बहुत बड़े स्कॉलर हैं। रंजन त्रिपाठी, पुष्प गुस्से जल्दी आके स्वागत कीजिए। दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय के इस कार्यक्रम में हम लोग एक एक सेकंड की गति को देख रहे हैं। जैसा कि राजीव जी ने कहा कि ये इस पुस्तक का केवल विमोचन ही नहीं है, बल्कि पिछले 200 सालों में संस्कृत को लेकर, इंडोलॉजी को लेके जो पूरी तरह से विदेशियों ने इस विद्या को एक अलग ढंग से स्थापित किया है, उसको चैलेंज करने का, उसको क्वेश्चन करने का, उसको पूर्व पक्ष करने का समय आ गया है। जरूरत इस बात की है कि हम जो हिंदुस्तान की संस्कृति है, कल्चर है, उसके बारे में लास्ट वर्ड इंडियन ट्रेडिशन का होगा या उन विदेशियों का होगा जो इस भारतीय समाज को खंड खंड करके तोड़ के नष्ट करना चाहती हैं, संस्कृत को, संस्कृति को। जैसा कि आपने कहा कि पूरी दुनिया में इंडोलॉजी के ऊपर इन लोगों ने जो स्कॉलरशिप्स का लेके, सेमिनार्स, कॉन्फ्रेंस, जर्नल्स का लेके और एक पूरा एक इन्होंने मूवमेंट चलाया हुआ है। आजकल खास करके अमेरिका में पॉलक जैसे बड़े स्कॉलर्स ने एक पूरा मूवमेंट चलाया हुआ है कि किस तरह से संस्कृत को एंटी दलित बताया जाए, संस्कृत को एंटी आदिवासी बताया जाए, संस्कृत को एंटी मॉडर्न इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस बताया जाए और पूरी तरह से इस समाज को हम आदिवासी के रूप में देखें, हम इसको दलित के रूप में देखें, हम इसको ब्राह्मणवादी व्यवस्था के अंतर्गत देखें, हम इसको और अन्य खंड खंड में टुकड़ों टिकड़ा करके इस भारत को देखने की जो एक षड्यंत्र पिछले 60-50 साल में एजुकेशन सिस्टम के द्वारा चलाया जा रहा है, उसको आज चैलेंज करने की और तोड़ने की आवश्यकता है। ये बैटल फॉर संस्कृत नहीं है, ये बैटल फॉर इंडिया है। जब हमने वैदिक टेक्नोलॉजी पे सेमिनार किया, उस वक्त कई मिनिस्टर्स ने फोन करके संस्कृत डिपार्टमेंट को मुझे मुबारकबाद दी, मगर एक मिनिस्टर थी माननीय नजमा हेपतुल्ला जी, जिन्होंने फोन करके नंबर ढूंढ के मुझे बुलाया, चाय पे बुला के उन्होंने डिस्कस किया कि हाँ, अगर हिंदुस्तान को एक रखना है, हिंदुस्तान को बचाना है, तो केवल संस्कृत ही उसका एक मीडियम बन सकती है। नजमा मैडम ने हमारे हिंदुस्तान के पहले शिक्षा मंत्री मौलाना साहब के शब्दों में कहा कि हिंदुस्तान इसलिए हिंदुस्तान है क्योंकि यहाँ पर एक संस्कृत है, एक पुरानी तहजीब है, एक कल्चर है जो हमको जीने की ताकत देता है। डॉक्टर नजमा हेपतुल्ला जी ने कहा कि मेरा डिपार्टमेंट बेशक माइनॉरिटी अफेयर्स डिपार्टमेंट है, मगर मैं संस्कृत बोर्ड के साथ, संस्कृत डिपार्टमेंट के साथ कुछ काम करना चाहती हूँ। उन्होंने कहा कि वैदिक संस्कृत का और अवेस्ता का बहुत संबंध है, मेरे डिपार्टमेंट से तुम प्रोजेक्ट लो और मैं तुम्हें जितना पैसा होगा, जितना आपको सोर्सेज चाहिए, मेरा डिपार्टमेंट देगा और संस्कृत डिपार्टमेंट माइनॉरिटी अफेयर्स के जॉनस्टियन स्टडीज को, अवेस्टर्न स्टडीज को वैदिक स्टडीज से कंपेयर करके काम करे। हमने प्रोजेक्ट सबमिट किया हुआ है एंड वी होप कि अप्रैल में वो प्रोजेक्ट शुरू हो जाएगा। ऐसी महान हस्ती डॉक्टर नजमा हेपतुल्ला ने एक बात और कही कि मेरे जो मिनिस्ट्री है वो लिंग्विस्टिक माइनॉरिटी अफेयर्स को भी देखती है। संस्कृत के स्पीकर्स कम होते जा रहे हैं, 40,000 रह गए हैं, उससे पहले 1 लाख से ऊपर थे, तो लिंग्विस्टिक माइनॉरिटी के रूप में संस्कृत को भी इनकी मिनिस्ट्री में स्पेशल केयर की जा रही है, इसलिए हमने आपको आज आमंत्रित किया।
नमस्कार, मैं बता रही थी ममता जी को कि मैं हार्वर्ड जाती थी और हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी में मेरी सबसे फेवरेट जगह होती थी हार्वर्ड बुक शॉप, जहाँ जाके मैं घंटों बैठ के किताबें देखती थी। मेरे साथ जो मेरे स्टाफ के लोग उन दिनों थे, वो मुझसे कहते थे किताब की दुकान की तरफ मत देखिए क्योंकि आप वहाँ घंटों बैठ जाएंगी। और मेरे घर में हर जगह किताबें मिलेंगी, पलंग के नीचे भी किताबें होती हैं, सराहने भी होती हैं, कबर्ड में होती हैं, हर जगह किताबें हैं। तो मेरे दोस्त जिंदगी में किताबें हैं, हर तरह की किताबें होती हैं। मुझे लैंग्वेज का शौक था, मुझे फिलॉलॉजी बहुत अच्छी लगती थी क्योंकि फिलॉलॉजी बताती है कि लोग का मूवमेंट कहाँ से कहाँ होगा। यहाँ प्रोफेसर मुझे बताया कि वो स्कॉलर हैं, प्रोफेसर हैं, उस डिपार्टमेंट में उनका सब्जेक्ट है स्पेनिश। तो मैं अक्सर सोचती हूँ कि नारंगी नारंगा बनी कि नारंगा नारंगी बनी, कि आज तक मुझे पता नहीं लगा कि फिलॉलॉजी कहाँ से आई। जब मैंने भारद्वाज जी के बारे में पढ़ा तो मैंने इन्हें बुलाया और इनसे बात की क्योंकि अवस्था, पारसी, ज़ोरास्ट्रियन मेरे मंत्रालय में आते हैं और हम 19 मार्च को एक बहुत बड़ी कॉन्फ्रेंस कर रहे हैं और एग्जीबिशन कर रहे हैं जो लंदन से आ रही है। और एग्जीबिशन में हम ज़ोरास्ट्रियंस के बारे में बहुत तफसील से डिस्कशन करेंगे। हमको बहुत से वहाँ से एग्जिबिट आ रहे हैं। मैं आप लोगों को सबको खुली दावत देती हूँ कि आप सब आइए, देखिए कि भारत एक ऐसा विशाल मुल्क है कि जो भी आया भारत ने अपना लिया, और इसीलिए हमारी रंगारंग की तहजीब है, अलग अलग जबान बोलने वाले, अलग अलग एथनिक ग्रुप, अलग अलग धर्मों को मानने वाले इस मुल्क में हैं। मगर हमारी अपनी एक प्राचीन संस्कृति है, ये हमारी धरोहर है, ये हमारी फाउंडेशन है। और मैं उन कदरों से आई हूँ। मौलाना अबुल कलाम आज़ाद, जो हिंदुस्तान के पहले मिनिस्टर फॉर शिक्षा मंत्री और कल्चर मंत्री भी थे, उन्होंने ICCR की बुनियाद रखी। और ICCR के जरिए, शायद बहुत से बच्चों को पता भी नहीं होगा, बहुत से लोगों को नहीं मालूम कि उन्होंने महाभारत और रामायण का ट्रांसलेशन पर्शियन और अरबिक में करा के इसलिए किया ताकि दुनिया के वो लोग जो संस्कृत नहीं समझते हैं, उन तक हमारी ये कल्चर, हमारी तहजीब, हमारी सोच, हमारा इथॉस वहां तक पहुंचे। तो मैं उन्हीं कदरों को लेके आई, उन्हीं वैल्यूज को मैं फॉलो करती हूँ। संस्कृत हमारी, आप लोग तो स्कॉलर्स हैं तो यहाँ बैठे हैं, संस्कृत हमारी प्राचीन, बहुत ही एंशिएंट लैंग्वेज है, जबान है। आज से एग्जैक्टली 65 साल पहले 7 मार्च को मौलाना साहब ने पहली कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑन लेटर्स की थी, और उसमें उन्होंने संस्कृत के बारे में जो बात कही, मैं समझती हूँ अगर वो जब सही थी तो आज भी सही है। ये कभी कभी सोचना पड़ता है। आपने बात की मल्होत्रा जी, मैंने पूरी किताब तो नहीं पढ़ी, पर पढ़ूंगी जरूर इत्मीनान से, मगर मैंने काफी कुछ पढ़ा। मैं तो कल सारा दिन 4 घंटे तो प्लेन में बैठी रही, एयरपोर्ट जयपुर जाना था एक कॉन्फ्रेंस के लिए। रात को 8 बजे आई, उसके बाद भी मैंने पढ़ने की कोशिश की, सुबह भी उठ के पढ़ा जो नहीं पढ़ पाई थी। आपने ठीक कहा, एक विवाद शुरू हो गया। मैं आपको एक बात बताऊं, मैं जब कैनेडी स्कूल के अंदर विमेंस लीडरशिप ग्रुप के लिए बराबर जाती थी, आई वाज एडवाइजर ओवर देयर, तो वहां मैं खास तौर पे जो वैदिक सेंटर है वहां गई। वहां एक जर्मन लेडी थी, मैंने देखा कि कुछ भी नहीं था उसके पास। मुझे बड़ा अफसोस हुआ हमारे कल्चर के, हमारे भारत के बारे में, हमारी संस्कृति सबसे पुरानी। जब यूरोप के वो लोग जो आज हमें सबक पढ़ाते हैं, चाहे यूरोप के हो चाहे वेस्टर्न हो, जब वो इग्नोरेंस के अंधकारों में जंगलों में रह रहे थे, तो हमारे यहाँ दक्षिणा और नालंदा जैसी यूनिवर्सिटीज थी। मैं फिर मौलाना साहब का यह जिक्र करूँ क्योंकि उन्होंने बुनियाद रखी है हमारी एजुकेशन। उन्होंने कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली में 1948 में अपनी मिनिस्ट्री की डिमांड के वक्त बोलते हुए ये कहा था, और अफसोस की बात है कि पिछली सरकारें जो थी वो थी तो उन्हीं की पार्टी थी, मगर उन्होंने उनको सप्रेस करने की कोशिश की क्योंकि वो देसी बात करते थे, विदेशी बातें करते थे। वो देसी जबान बोलते थे, विदेशी जबान नहीं बोलते थे। वो देसी कपड़े पहनते थे, वो विदेशी लिबास नहीं पहनते। इसलिए वो थोड़े सप्रेस किए गए, काफी सप्रेस किए गए। उनकी बात बताई, उन्होंने 1948 में कॉन्स्टिट्यूंट असेंबली में ये कहा कि मुझे इस पर कोई ऐतराज नहीं है कि मेरे मुल्क के नौजवान हिंदुस्तान से, भारत से बाहर जाएं नॉलेज लेने के लिए, इल्म हासिल करने, मगर मैं चाहता हूं कि मेरे भारत के इंस्टीट्यूशंस उस लेवल के हो, उस दर्जे के हो कि लोग इल्म की तलाश में उसे हासिल करने के लिए हिंदुस्तान आए। जैसा, और उन्होंने एग्जाम्पल दी, जैसा नालंदा और तक्षशिला के जमाने में होता था, दुनिया से लोग इल्म हासिल करने हिंदुस्तान आते थे। हमने आज तक दुनिया की 1 इंच भी जमीन पे कब्जा नहीं किया, कॉलोनाइज नहीं किया, मगर भारत की सभ्यता ने, भारत के कल्चर ने, भारत की सोच ने, भारत के इथॉस ने लोगों की जिंदगियों को, उनके दिलों पर, उनके दिमागों पर कब्जा किया है, राज किया है। मुझे यहाँ खुशी होते हुए बताने की कि अफगानिस्तान, उरुमची, काश्गर जो वेस्टर्न चाइना में है, वहां से उलानबाटर जो मंगोलिया में है, अंकुरवाट, इंडोनेशिया, नेपाल, श्रीलंका, इन तमाम मुल्कों में जाके अपने भारत के पदम चिन्ह देखे हैं। अफगानिस्तान में तालिबान ने गौतम बुद्ध की उस आलीशान मूर्ति को बर्बाद कर दिया। मेरी आंखों से आंसू बह रहे थे जब मैं IPO के कॉन्फ्रेंस में उसके खिलाफ रेजोल्यूशन कर रही थी। वहां मैं क्यूबा में थी, तो वहां के लीडर ने मुझसे पूछा, तुम काय को रो रही हो? तो मैंने उनसे कहा कि वो दुनिया की एक हेरिटेज थी, अमानत थी, जिसको ये तालिबान ने बर्बाद किया। मैं इसलिए रोई। मैंने 1000 केव्स ऑफ बुद्धा उरुमची और काश्गर में देखे। मैंने ब्रह्मानंद और बोरोबुदु देखा है इंडोनेशिया में। मैं घुटने घुटने घास में उलानबाटर में गई थी। पुराने मंदिर है वहां, सब लोग समझते हैं कि वहां सिर्फ बुद्धिज्म है, वहां हिंदू धर्म के भी मंदिर है जो आज अच्छी हालत में नहीं है। संस्कृत का भी यही हुआ। अगर हम संस्कृत को खुद संभाल के रखते अपने देश में, तो दूसरे उसको लेके नहीं चले जाते, हमारी विरासत को उड़ा के ले जाते। और अपने तरीके पे, जैसे कहा मल्होत्रा जी ने, कि अपने तरीके पर उन्होंने पेश करने की कोशिश की, डिस्टॉर्ट किया हमारे कल्चर को, हमारी सोच को। हर ये कि ये कहते हैं कि हमारा क्लोज माइंड है, हम लिबरल नहीं है। मैं उनसे सवाल करना चाहती हूँ कि आज तक अमेरिका में एक प्रेसिडेंट तो औरत बन नहीं पाई। हमारे यहाँ तो प्राचीन काल में देवों की पूजा होती थी, तो देवियों की भी पूजा होती थी। सरस्वती की वंदना हुई, सरस्वती को हमने फूल माला चढ़ाई। शिक्षा, एजुकेशन, नॉलेज की देवी तो भी तो महिला ही है, महिला का प्रतीक है। बात करें दौलत की, आज सब वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज दौलत के पीछे भाग रहे हैं, तो लक्ष्मी तो है, वो दौलत की मालिक है, उसकी भी तो पूजा करते हैं। तो कैसे हम क्लोज माइंड है? जहां बात होती है ताकत की तो हम दुर्गा की बात करते हैं। तो क्लोज माइंड तो उनके हैं, हमारे नहीं है। हमारे माइंडों को क्लोज कर दिया, क्या हमारी गलती? मैं समझती हूँ कि अगर जो प्रथा शुरुआत 48 में और 51 में मौलाना साहब ने शुरू की थी, वो कंटिन्यू की जाती, वो कायम रहती, तो संस्कृत की आज वो हालत नहीं होती कि 1 लाख से कम होकर 40,000 लोग रह गए। कुछ लोगों ने हो सकता है इसको एलीट की जबान बनाया। कोई भी जबान जब अवाम की जबान होती है तो वो जिंदा रहती है, क्योंकि लोग बोलते हैं उसमें। मैं मानती हूँ कि आपका कहना ठीक है, शुरुआत में बोली जाती थी, शुरुआत में उसके अंदर ड्रामा है, उसके अंदर बहुत कुछ है संस्कृत में, पर लोगों को मालूम नहीं है, क्योंकि कुछ लोगों ने उसको अपनी जागीर बना लिया। हमें कोशिश करना चाहिए कि हमारी जो धरोहर है, हमारी जो ये विरासत है, इसको हम आम लोगों तक पहुंचाएं और फख्र से कहें कि मैं हिंदुस्तानी हूं और मैं हिंदुस्तानी कल्चर को मानता हूं। जैसे कि मौलाना साहब ने कहा था, मुझे इस बात पर, मैं एक मुसलमान हूं और मैं मुस्लिम धर्म में मानता हूं, मगर मुझे इस बात पर भी फख्र है कि मैं एक हिंदुस्तानी हूं और इस अजीम हिंदुस्तान में मेरा भी हक है, मेरा भी हिस्सा है। हमें यही सोच के आगे बढ़ना है। हमें वो कॉलोनियल माइंडसेट से बाहर निकलना है। हमारे पास बहुत कुछ है जो हम दुनिया को सिखाते आए हैं और सिखाएंगे आइंदा। इसीलिए मैंने मेरे मंत्रालय में, हमारा भारतीय जनता पार्टी का जो मैनिफेस्टो है, उसमें एक पॉइंट है, टू प्रिजर्व द कल्चर, द डाइवर्स कल्चर ऑफ इंडिया अंडर, मैंने उसमें थोड़ी सी तरमीम कर दी। मैंने कहा अंडर द ओवरऑल इंडियन कल्चर, मैंने थोड़ा चेंज करा कि हम सब एक हिंदुस्तानी कल्चर, एक हिंदुस्तानी संस्कृति के अंदर अपने इंडिविजुअल कल्चर को संभाल के रखें। मुझमें और इजिप्ट में रहने वाले मुसलमान में शायद कोरिलेशनिस्ट है, पर मेरे लिबास, मेरा खाना पीना, सबसे बड़ी बात है कि मेरी सोच भी अलग है। मैं एक हिंदुस्तानी की तरह सोचती हूँ। मैं आप मल्होत्रा जी के और भारद्वाज जी की तरह सोचती हूँ, वहां के लोगों की तरह सोचती नहीं। और सबसे बड़ी बुनियाद एकता की सोच है। कल्चर एक अलग चीज है, मजहब एक अलग चीज है। और जो हंटिंगटन की थ्योरी है, मैं उसको पूरा रिजेक्ट करती हूँ। आई डोंट एग्री विद यू। कल्चर ज्योग्राफिकल होता है, रिलीजियस नहीं होता। कल्चर, इतिहास, संस्कृति एक रीजन की होती है। हम इंडस वैली कल्चर की बात करते हैं, कोई नाइल वैली कल्चर की बात करें, हम हिंदुस्तानी संस्कृति और उसकी कल्चर की बात करते हैं। धर्म तो आते हैं, धर्म अलग अलग लोग अलग अलग सोच के होते हैं, मगर हमें अपनी संस्कृति पे, हमारे कल्चर पे, हमारी विरासत पे फख्र करना चाहिए। और मुझे बहुत खुशी है कि मल्होत्रा जी ने बड़ी अच्छी से एक डायलॉग शुरू किया है। आप इसमें आगे बढ़िए, लोगों को समझाइए। जो आज हम एक अगेन न्यू कॉलोनियल माइंडसेट में रह रहे हैं, उससे लिबरेशन की हमें जरूरत है, हमें उससे बाहर निकलना है। ये टाइटल क्यों रहा, बैटल ऑफ संस्कृत? हम कोई लड़ाई नहीं लड़ रहे हैं, हम खाली अपनी पुरानी धरोहर को याद कर रहे हैं, याददाश्त ताजा कर रहे हैं। हमारी कोई लड़ाई नहीं है। लड़ाई उन लोगों की होगी कि जो आपस में लड़ रहे हैं, जिनकी कोई संस्कृति नहीं है, जिनका कुछ इतिहास नहीं है, जिनका कोई कल्चर नहीं है। हमारे पास तो बहुत कुछ है, हमें खाली उसको याद करना है। थोड़ा मुझे लगा ये टाइटल, you don't have to fight for Sanskrit. It is there. It's our culture.
जैसा कि माननीय मंत्री महोदय ने कहा कि ये टाइटल दी बैटल फॉर संस्कृत, वैसे इसके ऊपर राजीव जी बोलेंगे, मगर हमारे लिए अभी की जो स्थिति है वो बैटल वाली ही है, क्योंकि हम लोग इसे धर्म युद्ध के रूप में देखते हैं। धर्म युद्ध का मतलब वो हिंसक युद्ध नहीं है। जैसा राजीव जी ने अपनी पुस्तक में लिखा भी है कि भारत में ये परंपरा रही है शास्त्रार्थ करने की। हम अलग अलग मत रख सकते हैं, रखने भी चाहिए, क्योंकि हम मानव हैं, हमारी अलग अलग सोच है, अलग अलग हमारे अपने कंक्लूजन्स लाइफ में है, उनको हम रखते हैं। मगर उसके लिए हम शास्त्रार्थ करके जो सही तथ्य है उसको सामने रखते हैं। भारतीय सांस्कृतिक परंपरा, भारतीय दार्शनिक चिंतन परंपरा, इन सब में एक ही तत्व है जो हमको ध्यान रखना चाहिए कि पिछले कम से कम रिकॉर्डेड आर्कियोलॉजिकल एविडेंसेस के बेस पे बोल रहा हूं कि पिछले 10,000 साल से जो भारतीय चिंतन की परंपरा है उसका एक ही वैशिष्ट्य है, वो है सातत्य, कंटिन्यूटी। हमारे इंडियन थॉट में कहीं ब्रेक नहीं है। हम वैदिक काल से लेकर और आज अरविंद, टैगोर, गांधी, इन सब भारतीय चिंतकों के मत को देखें, हमारे यहां वही तथ्य शास्त्रार्थ के माध्यम से, बहस के माध्यम से, जो समाज के, संसार के, मानव जाति के कल्याण के लिए है, उसकी खोज करने की, उसको समाज की, दुनिया के सामने रखने का प्रयास भारतीय चिंतन परंपरा ने किया है। क्योंकि हम ये देख रहे हैं कि भारतीय शिक्षा व्यवस्था में, भारतीय चिंतन में, ये जो मैडम ने कहा था कॉलोनियल सोच, कॉलोनियल थॉट जो हमारे अंदर, हमारे कपड़ों से लेके हमारे दिलो दिमाग तक छा गया है और जो हमारी आत्मा को आक्रांत करने की ओर अग्रसर है, उसको बचाने के लिए धर्म युद्ध करने की आवश्यकता है। मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा, आई रिक्वेस्ट प्रोफेसर एल्स टू स्पीक अबाउट दिस बुक and about this movement of Sri Rajiv Malhotra.
क्योंकि आपकी हिंदी के मुकाबले मेरी हिंदी इतने अच्छी नहीं होगी। मैं अभी अंग्रेजी में बोल दूंगा, क्षमा कीजिए। And of course in politics I'm all for Angrezi Hakao, so I beg you to bear with me. This is a bit clumsy, but okay. Let's impose this colonial intrusion on you for a few minutes. I met Professor Pollock in 2004 at the European Conference for South Asia Studies. He was talking about a fairly non-controversial subject, something about Marathi literature, and I must confess I didn't pay much attention because I had forgotten all of it. However, he was the great star of the conference, and its main theme was to lambast and to make fun of Murli Manohar Joshi's reform of the history textbooks. And essentially, the message was, by one speaker after another. You see, Murli Manohar Joshi is doing a really ridiculous job. All the textbooks are being rewritten, and the result is not very good. Or, to sum up, what they meant was, okay, the Hindutva people are unspeakably evil, but fortunately, they are also abysmally stupid. However, there was one exception. There was one textbook that, they couldn't get around because it was too good. And that was precisely the one about the most controversial period, the time of the Islamic invasions. And that was written by a professor of this university, Meenakshi Jain. So really most guns were trained on her. Now, in the intervening years she has continued her research, and 1 or 2 years ago she has brought out his book Rama and Ayodhya, in which, among other things, she documents how the so-called eminent historians who had led the battle against the Hindu temple at Ayodhya, how they were questioned in court, and how they fell apart one after another. So it is official. Of course, the press has kept the lid on it as much as possible. But in that book it is all documented how they had no case at all. How one after another confessed, I've never been to Ayodhya, I have no archaeological training, I only had it from hearsay. And yet, their case on Ayodhya has carried the day for about 20 years. Now, of course, they don't talk as loud anymore. But they have been saying, since the end of the 80s, that there was nothing to be seen in Ayodhya, that there had never been a Hindu temple there. In fact, it is because of this that there was an Ayodhya controversy at all. Because among Muslim opinion, there was not so much resistance to the idea of a Hindu temple there. They didn't care for Ayodhya so much. They never go on pilgrimage there. Hindus do. It is not a Muslim sacred site, it is a Hindu sacred site. And it was not only a sacred site 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. What really counts is that it is a sacred site for them today. So actually, history does not intervene really. And to the extent that history is important, there was a consensus. Muslims, British, and other European travelers, as well as Hindus, agreed that there had been a temple there. So that was really not in question. And historians, of course, may question a consensus sometimes if there is new evidence. But there was no new evidence. On the contrary, all the evidence that has been found since points in the opposite direction, that of course there was a temple there. In fact, one of the field archaeologists who has dug up the foundations of the Hindu temple, Mr. K.K. Mohammed, has only a few days ago revealed in his autobiography that, first of all, of course, he saw with his own eyes the foundations of the temple, but secondly, that in his experience, it is precisely the eminent historians who created the whole Ayodhya controversy in the first place. Because in the 1980s, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had worked towards a compromise, which would consist in essentially leaving the site to the Hindus and then appeasing the Muslim leadership with some other concessions. This typical Congress culture, horse trading, not very principled, but it has the merit of being bloodless. You see, the thousands of people killed in the Ayodhya affair, that need not have happened. That two governments have fallen over the Ayodhya affair that could perfectly have been avoided. So it is very rare that intellectuals play a political role. But here it has really happened, and not for the better. And yet, they carried the day, and at that time, among Indologists, it was absolutely, well, not only fashionable, it was practically obligatory to deny that there had ever been a temple there. And one of the scholars who followed suit, who did his best to satisfy the eminent historians, and who probably also, believed so himself, was Sheldon Pollock. Indeed, while most people only paid some lip service to the idea that there had never been a temple there, he actually made the Ayodhya affair the basis of his own research into the Ramayana, and he started to prove not only that today's Hindu militants were evil people with designs on, against the minorities and so on, but that the Ramayana itself has been a piece of propaganda to whip up Hindu fervor against non-Hindus and particularly against the Muslims, even at a time when there were no Muslims yet. So that is scholarship for you. You prove something that is not obvious. It's like geocentrism. Everybody can see the sun rise every day and can see with his own eyes how the sun goes around the earth. And yet, scholarship has proven that it is the earth turning around the sun. There's no obvious. So scholarship deals with discovering non-obvious things. So in this case, proving that the Ramayana 2,000-3,000 years ago already foresaw that Muslims were going to come and that, Hindu hatred had to be directed against them. Now, in Rajiv's book, one other element has struck me, one chapter about Sheldon Pollock's treatment of Buddhism. You see, Buddhism nowadays is a mighty weapon against Hinduism. And so history is construed in such a way that Hinduism is bad and Buddhism is good. Hinduism is the problem, Buddhism the solution. For example, it is said, not in the religious but in the secular sphere, that the institution of the university was created by Buddhism. In fact, it is Buddhist sources themselves that testify that the Buddha's own contemporaries, King Prasenadi and General Bandula, had studied at Takshashila University, which therefore was already in existence. So it is Hinduism, though the term did not exist yet, but Hindu civilization that created the institution of the university. And the Buddha or Buddhist circles borrowed that institution and continued that institution. Okay, now in history there is this principle that you have to write the things of the past the way they really have been. That's an important formula that all historians learn in the beginning. Now here, in India especially, the opposite prevails, namely that modern concerns are projected onto ancient times. In particular, in universities especially, but in politics also, many people are concerned about egalitarianism, about equality, and try to impose that on society, which is legitimate, of course. But they also project it onto ancient history, where there were other concerns. Like, for example, they say that the Buddha was a social revolutionary, an anti-caste revolutionary, who wanted to create an equal society and so on. Now the Buddha was concerned with liberation, with nirvana. And he was saying just the opposite, namely that this is a full-time job. You have to become a monk to do it, and not work. You see, not build your own house, not do any work. You have to go begging, and then you have to fully concentrate on the job of achieving nirvana. So, if you want to reform society, you're going to do something else than achieving nirvana. And so the Buddha was not concerned with reforming society. On the contrary, wherever Buddhism went, it adapted to the local circumstances. You see, in Japan it adapted to military feudalism. Indeed, you see the warrior class, the samurais, became devotees of Zen Buddhism. And so it went like that everywhere, and also, of course, in India. The Buddha himself was an elite figure par excellence. He was a prince. He was respected by all the leaders of his day, not only for his spiritual stature, but also for his knowledge of politics. He was consulted on political matters till the end of his life. Why? Because he was an elitist. All the kings considered him one of them. And so there was no break with Hinduism either. You see, he practiced whatever religion was around him, adding a few things as Hindus are perfectly entitled to. He had two Hindu gurus, and he added something to their message. He went a bit beyond what he had learned, as good pupils do. He quoted from the Upanishads. He actually quoted from that. Though, of course, the Pali Canon does not say so, but you can compare the texts and see for yourself. The Buddhists took the Hindu gods with them wherever they went. All the way in Japan, you can find Buddhist temples with shrines for Indra, for Saraswati, for Brahma. The Rama story, of which Sheldon Pollock tries to show that it is post-Buddhist, that it is in fact a reaction against Buddhism, was in fact older than Buddhism, and was carried along by the Buddhists abroad. When they went to Tibet, they brought the Rama story with them. Indeed, you see that the Rama story is older than the Buddha, is proven by the Buddha himself, because he himself is very proud to belong to the same lineage as Rama, and he too belonged to the Ikshvaku clan. And indeed, at one point in the Jataka stories, he says that he himself was a reincarnation of Rama. Mind you, the Shankaracharya, I think of Kanchi, maybe of Sringeri, at any rate, one of the Shankaracharyas, about 10 years ago, made an agreement with this Mr. S.N. Goenka of the Vipassana meditation technique, who is a fierce Buddhist, or who used to be a fierce Buddhist. And, the Shankaracharya promised not to bring up the story anymore that the Buddha was an avatar of Vishnu, because some Buddhists, some militant Buddhists, Indian Buddhists at least, feel offended by this attempt by Hindus to rope in the Buddha. Now, of course, it is to be noted that this is a one-sided compromise. The Buddhists did not concede anything. It is the Hindu side that, try to reform its own doctrines. Anyway, both of them assumed that it is Hindus who have invented the story that Rama and the Buddha were both incarnations of Vishnu. This is not exactly true. You see, though Vishnu does not come into the picture, the idea that Rama and the Buddha are the same person, that the Buddha was a reincarnation of Rama, was launched by the Buddha himself. This is not a Hindu invention, this is, if that's what you want to call it, a Buddhist invention. And so on and so on. So, coming to my main point, and it's very short. Buddhism is really brought to the fore by Sheldon Pollock because of its language policy. And as you know, at first the Buddha preached in the local language. Then his great-great-great-grand pupils wrote down whatever they could remember in the Pali canon, which was of course not in the language of the Buddha, because that language had already evolved. It's also geographically not the language of the area of the Buddha. But okay, though, it's a popular language, it's not Sanskrit. Therefore, some people say, Sanskrit is wrong, spirituality should be taught in the people's language, and that's what the Buddha did, and that's what his whole tradition did, Unfortunately, they switched to Sanskrit, and so Sheldon Pollock invents a conspiracy theory to explain that. There are variations on this, like Johannes Bronkhorst says that the royal courts switched to Sanskrit, or accepted Sanskrit at some point, and that to negotiate with the state, the Buddhist order had to adopt Sanskrit. Now, instead of just sending some translator, some whiz kid who knew Sanskrit, no, they took over Sanskrit completely. They translated their own text, they wrote new texts, all in Sanskrit, just to please the royal courts. That is just not very logical. And the real reason for switching to Sanskrit is much simpler. You see, some people say, but Pali is the language of the Am Admi, of the common man. Now, Pali is not the language of the Am Admi. Who among you knows Pali? You see, maybe one or two specialists have studied it, and otherwise no one knows it. You see, the problem with vernaculars is that they change all the time. They differ from region to region. And so, after a few centuries, the language that the common people spoke was not the language of the Buddha. It was not the language of their scriptures, of the Pali canon. And so they were lost from a linguistic angle. So the practical thing to do was to adopt a stable and universal language. This process was perhaps helped, as Sheldon Pollock writes, by the intrusion of foreign kings, namely especially Kanishka, or the Kushanas, who adopted Buddhism, and who at the same time started to use Sanskrit. In fact, Kanishka called a council where people from many areas where Buddhism flourished came together, and to make it work, to make them all understand one another, they had to agree on a common language, which was obviously Sanskrit. And so, from then on, Sanskrit became the main language of Buddhism. Sanskrit, of course, is very useful for the common languages in the sense that it unites them. It provides a common backbone to all of them in India. If I may make a little comparison with the situation in Europe, which is quite similar to the one in India, we too have a classical language called Latin, and you see in the last decades it has been phased out completely, just like Sanskrit has suffered a lot here in India, because people think it is useless. Why study Latin? Why study Sanskrit? It's wasted. In fact, it is not wasted at all. You see, they conducted a test teaching pupils English, who were native English speakers, teaching them English for 8 hours, and another group of pupils had to learn English for 4 hours and Latin for 4 hours. At the end of the course, those that had learned Latin not only knew Latin, while the others did not, but knew English better than the other group. So, in the case of Sanskrit too, your Hindi is improved by knowing Sanskrit. And indeed, I myself, I really should brush up on my Sanskrit, because that way, next time, मैं आपके साथ हिंदी में बोल दूंगा.
आपने शेल्डन, पॉलॉक, एस्टॉल, विंडी, विट्जेल, इन अमेरिकन और वेस्टर्न स्कॉलर्स ने जिस तरह से भारतीय परंपरा को डिस्टॉर्शन के साथ पेश किया है, अच्छी अच्छी अंग्रेजी में, संस्कृत के अच्छी कोटेशंस में, उसको आपने उजागर किया। आपने, मुझे आपकी बात सुनते हुए याद आ रहा था कि एक बहुत बड़ी बुद्धिस्ट कॉन्फ्रेंस विज्ञान भवन में हुई। इंदिरा जी की स्पीच लिखने का काम एक स्कॉलर को दिया, उन्होंने मुझे दिया, मैंने स्पीच लिखी और जो मेरी अपनी विदेशी ट्रेनिंग थी मैंने लिखा कि बुद्धिज्म अगेंस्ट हिंदुइज्म भगवान बुद्ध ने किया। स्पीच बाई चांस इंदिरा जी के सामने गई, उन्होंने बुलाया और कहा कि पंडित जी ये तो आपने गलत कर दिया, हमको तो ये बताया था कि बुद्धिज्म भारतीय परंपरा में एक स्टेज है, वो किसी के खिलाफ नहीं है, कोई विरोधी नहीं है, वो भारतीय परंपरा का एक नया परिमार्जित और समाज को जो चाहिए था वो रूप था। भगवान बुद्ध ने समाज के कल्याण के लिए उसको प्रस्तुत किया था, इनका विरोध नहीं है। ये चीज उस समय मतलब मुझे समझ में आई थी जब मैं एमए का विद्यार्थी था। दूसरी बात जो प्रोफेसर ने बहुत बड़ी उठाई है कि वो, मैंने भी उससे, क्या ये लोग क्या करते हैं, शुरू में आरएसएस, बीजेपी, मुरली मनोहर जोशी, इनका नाम लेकर उनको अच्छी अच्छी गालियां देते हैं। उसके बाद सेकंड पेज पे शुरू करते हैं कि संस्कृत एलीट ब्राह्मणों की भाषा है और ये कन्नड़ की विरोधी है, ये मराठी की विरोधी है, और उसमें जो है एक शब्द प्रयोग करते हैं कि राजशेखर ने काव्य शास्त्र में लिखा कि संस्कृत है और अन्य 8 मलेच्छ भाषाएं हैं। हमारे यहाँ म्लेच्छ शब्द का संस्कृत में अर्थ ये होता है कि जो भाषा सुसंस्कृत नहीं है, रिफाइन नहीं है। वहां म्लेच्छ का मतलब कोई ओछा या नीचता वाला अर्थ उसका नहीं है, मगर वो इसको उस रूप में दिखाएंगे। वो ये दिखाएंगे कि पूरी जो संस्कृत साहित्य है, साहित्य नामी कोई चीज नहीं है संस्कृत में। अगर संस्कृत के लिटरेचर की बात करेंगे तो हम उसको फर्स्ट एडी यानी अशोक घोष से शुरू करेंगे। उससे पहले संस्कृत लिटरेचर था ही नहीं। कहते नहीं वो उपनिषद थे, वेद थे, ग्रंथ साहित्य, सूत्र साहित्य, दैट वाज ओरल ट्रेडिशन। लिटरेचर मींस रिटन फॉर्म। तो इस तरह से वो भारतीय परंपरा में कैसे कैसे आप उसको डाउन कर सकते हैं, डिस्टॉर्शन कर सकते हैं, उसका वो प्रयास करते हैं। एक और अच्छा पॉइंट प्रोफेसर एल्स ने हमारे सामने प्रस्तुत किया कि इतिहास को लेके एक सुनियोजित ढंग से, जिस तरह से, मैं इसके लिए क्षमा चाहूंगा अपने दिल्ली विश्वविद्यालय से कि दिल्ली स्कूल ऑफ हिस्ट्री ने, बाद में जेएनयू भी बना, उन लोगों ने जिसके खिलाफ संस्कृत डिपार्टमेंट आजकल आंदोलन कर रहा है, हम लोग अपनी वैदिक क्रोनोलॉजी, वैदिक हिस्ट्री की बात कर रहे हैं कि भारतीय इतिहास सिंधु घाटी से प्रारंभ नहीं होता है। अभी आर्कियोलॉजिकल सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया ने तेलंगाना में, रानी की खेती में जो आर्कियोलॉजिकल एविडेंसेस मिले हैं वो बताती है कि वो वैदिक कल्चर, यज्ञ करने वाला कल्चर, वो 5000, 6000, 7000 बीसी में भी उपलब्ध था भारत में। उसके लिए बहुत अच्छा स्टॉल ने दिया, एक अग्नि करके 2 बड़े वॉल्यूम लिखा। स्टॉल ने कहा कि हाँ, जो आर्यंस फर्स्ट मिलियन बीसी में बाहर से आए थे, उन्होंने यहाँ के सिंधु घाटी के लोगों से यज्ञ करना सीखा, और रोमिला थापर मैडम ने उसको इंडोर्स किया कि हाँ, ये विदेशी वैदिक लोग, आर्यंस लोग आए थे और उन्होंने यहाँ के जो यज्ञ करने की परंपरा जो आदिवासी समाज की या इंडिजिनियस लोगों की थी, उन्होंने उसको वहां से सीखा और बाद में उसको उन्होंने वैदिक समाज में उसको डेवलप किया। इस तरह से पूरे इतिहास को, हमारी अस्मिता को, हमारी सांस्कृतिक पहचान को कहां कहां, किन किन बिंदुओं को लेकर उन्होंने नष्ट करने का प्रयास किया है, उसको प्रोफेसर एल्स ने बताया। अब मैं रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं प्रोफेसर टी एस सत्यनाथ, दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी के कंपेरेटिव लिटरेचर के जो बहुत फाउंडर स्कॉलर हैं, कि वो आए और अपनी बात रखें।
सबको नमस्कार। प्रोफेसर Professor S and Professor Rajesh Malhotra. You might find it's great. I'll speak in English because I'm not very fluent in Sanskritist, so I can't speak neither in Hindi nor in Sanskrit. I'll go back to English. It looks like a contradiction that a scholar who is not a Sanskrit and who is a scholar of Indian languages, principally a Kannada scholar, is here to speak about a book which is about the battle for Sanskrit. I presume I have been called because of two main reasons. I thank Professor Bharadwaj and the department for bringing me here. One of them is some of the material that I have published and written has gone into this book. Some of my findings, which were done basically to understand the nature of relationship between Indian languages and cultures, and some of the formulation that I did, that Professor Rajiv Malhotra has utilized in his book. That's one thing. The second thing is, I taught about some Indian literary historiography, and Sheldon Pollock's 2003 book, Literary Cultures in History, is one of the texts that I have constantly taught and I have asked my students to go through the introduction and then take one of the Indian languages, apply it, and critique and go beyond the text, beyond the introduction. I must say, it's around 2004 or 2005, Professor Shimali of the History Department brought this book to my notice and said, you people must take interest in it. So I included it as a part and parcel of my literary historiography teaching. And in fact, we even tried to organize a seminar. Not much has been written on this book or has not been interrogated much, except a seminar volume. Seminar is a journal. In 2006, probably a series of articles were written taking a view at what Sheldon Pollock's position is. I know there are several scholars in comparative literature who are very critical of this text, and we have an alternative position. We even tried to do a panel taking a look at Sheldon Pollock's view of Indian literature and the nature of relationship that he postulates between Sanskrit and other Indian languages. I will not go into details. So that I think this is my arhata for being here, despite not being a Sanskritist. The book is very important, according to me, because it contests the biases towards approaches that are inherent towards Sanskrit and Indian culture. It also contests the nature of scholarship of Sanskrit studies in the European, vis-a-vis the American academia, and proposes a new approach, quote and I quote, as an insider to the long linguistic tradition. I think there are certain problems that the book assumes, and let me place them well in advance, and I believe these are a result of 150 or 200 years of Sanskrit scholarship via Orientalism and via modernism, which has consolidated many of the methodological and theoretical issues. Hence, I believe these are problems that Professor Malhotra has inherited with the tradition and has not been able to negotiate the way he has negotiated other things. The title of the book is The Battle for Sanskrit. I'm a bit unhappy, and then the subtitle, Political Sacred, Oppressive Liberating, Dead or Alive. These are actually modernist constructions of logical oppositions, where one of them is favored and the other one is not favored or neutralized, like self and other. And the term battle is also a modernist term. Battle, eradication, elimination, uprooting, these are the terminological fights through which the modernist paradigm fights. If you are very much interested, you can take a look at an article by Axel Margolin. This is the Smallpox into Knowledge System, which is published in 1992-93. You can take a look at it, and there is the problematics of treating the world in terms of binaries, and then what happens is, contrary to that, we have continuum model in India. For example, the Vana and Kshetra, which we perceive as logical oppositions between the Griha and the wilderness. The Grihastha and the Sannyasi is not that. The Sannyasi is supposed to go through Grama Nagara Kheda Karvata Pattana Dronamaka. So he is mediating. The Sannyasana versus the Grihastha is mediated by the Chaturvarna system and the typological. There are varieties of typologies that are possible. So I personally believe the model in which the Indian culture constructs itself is radically different from the binary opposition model. So this is just the introduction. So what the other problem that I noticed is the whole text is about Sanskrit and Sanskriti. Whereas Sanskrit is about the Sanskrit language, Sanskrit is about Indian culture. In this debate, probably the author will have more opportunity to go back and take a look at some of the issues that arise here. What it does is, it constructs the whole debate in terms of a language and a culture, which probably has a tendency of a totalizing gaze and a sort of homogenizing the culture and the diversity that exists within it. Professor Malhotra is clearly aware of the plurality, but the terminology that he uses might make people accuse that he is totalizing and homogenizing the culture. It is here that I want to come back to Indian culture. The way I understand Indian culture is, Sanskrit not placed at the top, or no language placed at the top, but it's an amalgamation of languages. If you draw the timeline, I have no time, and I couldn't bring my visuals. You have Sanskrit with about 1,800, 2,000 years, 2,800 years. If you want to climb more a long history, with if you look in terms of literature, the Vedic or the Brahminical, the classical Sanskrit, the Buddhist, the Jaina, the Bhakti, and the subsequent periods. Whereas if you go to Prakrit, the Vedic is conspicuously absent there. If you go to Tamil, it has Buddhist, Jaina, Bhakti, and the Persian and the modernism. If you come to Kannada, the Buddhist is missing. So each language, there is a time, they follow the same trajectory. There is a time gap. So this problem of different literature starting at different points and the periodization problem can easily be taken care of by chopping off a literature that is not there. Most of the Indian languages doesn't have a Buddhist literature. Many Indian languages doesn't have a Jaina literature, but Jaina literature is there in Tamil, Kannada, Marathi, Gujarati, Hindi. So what it, and Bhakti, each and every Indian language has. So now if we look in terms of different parameters to understand it, rather than saying Sanskrit and non-Sanskritic, then it starts making. They look like a pluralistic epistemology because medieval Indian literature always existed in multilingualism. Sanskrit, Prakrit, and the regional languages collaborated depending upon the literature. Is a Buddhist literature or a Jaina literature or Bhakti or whatever it is. That is the second issue. That's how I conceive medieval Indian literary culture as a pluralistic epistemology. That means pluralistic. The languages and literatures exist side by side, constantly absorb each other's element, and keeps growing, keeps changing. The model is not one of shift from one to another, as in the case of logical opposition, but a continually evolving system. That means it is constantly, and it is live, constantly changing. And the another issue is, in medieval Indian literature, whereas Sanskrit literature has to be approached exclusively through print text, like the Western model, the medieval Indian literature used the transmediality here. Medieval Indian literature exists in script, which I call scriptocentric. It exists in orality, which I call phonocentric. and it exists in body-centric tendencies, which are body-centric representations, which are performative in nature. Many knowledge that we call, what we call today as the Shastra, were actually the body-centric knowledge systems which had not been codified for a very long time, and they are pluralistic social epistemologies, because either the caste or community or some group goes into the construction of this knowledge. It is these groups. For example, the music is the property of a particular caste or a particular community or a particular gharana. So the nature of knowledge, or the nature of what we call culture in medieval Indian society, is not only pluralistic epistemology in terms of language, but it is also pluralistic in terms of the transmedial representation, either written, oral or performative. And also it goes beyond this, and it is an amalgamation of these things that we need to look at in order to understand medieval Indian literary culture. Okay. Sanskrit is a part of that. Let me now go back to an analogy. Somewhere between around the Gupta time to up to the end of Rashtrakuta time, a series of knowledge texts, what we call the Shastras, get composed in different in Sanskrit and also in different Indian languages wherever literature is there. And this relationship is where here knowledge that is not part and parcel of the written system. For example, if you look at either Varahamihira, his Brihat Samhita, or contemporary Kannada text, knowledge, for example, tank building, stone breaking, making glue to glue the wood, Vajra, which is called, they are all part and parcel of the Sanskrit text. So now, what I see here is a knowledge with one hand which is insulated within the caste communities and their day-to-day profession, day-to-day life, and there is so this is what exactly I call knowledge or text or material keeps flowing from one format to the another format. Most of the texts in Sanskrit take a word, for example, Ullasa, Manasa Ullasa, we are very familiar, or Kosha. These are all words for ocean. So the knowledge constructions model basically derived from an ocean. I don't take, for example, in Kannada too, they take the same word. I presume ocean is the model here, not because of something. Ocean is signifies the churning of the ocean, Samudra Manthana, and the 14 auspicious things from the Kamadhenu, etc., Chintamani and other things, including the Halahala and Nectar, they all were generated through the churning of the ocean. It's a very important image for me because it's through this churning, a manthana, a vada, that a new discourse has to generate. And I'll go back to that. I want the title of the book would have taken a manthana or a vagvada or a vada rather than a battle, reflecting the typical Indian way of approaching a controversy. As a postmodernist, I would say problematization of debate on Sanskrit or something like that. Anyhow, let me go back. But the ocean is located, let me just give a lower level analogy. Indian Ocean, Hindu Ocean, and the Sanskrit has the knowledge store of that. But where did the water come from? The water came actually from different regions. And in medieval Indian situation, I presume the nature of relationship that existed between Indian languages, literatures and cultures, and the purported quote-unquote Sanskrit and Indian culture is of this nature. I think unless we don't imagine this relationship that medieval India had among them in different literary cultures of India, it's extremely difficult for us to take not only the homogenization of culture, but also homogenization of literary culture, but also what Sheldon, Pollock and his school of scholars try to approach. Now, having looked at it, I will not go into the details of the book. I will just look at two issues and then wind it up. One of the most important issues is the classicism, to which Professor S has already addressed it. I will just go into it. Classic and classicism in the European case, the Greek and Latin, and the classic and classicism in the Indian case or the Asian case are going to be different. Persian, Chinese, Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, Telugu, which have been now declared as, and Odia, their nature of classicism, and the classicism as we talk in the case of Europe is going to be different, because the dead versus the live, one of the major arguments of the Sanskrit dead are alive. This criteria has already been used there. The languages are not in use anymore, hence there is a contestation between modernity and classicism in the case of the Greek and Latin. But this doesn't exist. The model that has been used here is that, for example, ancient Tamil is not, no one can understand. Ancient Kannada, probably not many people, 99.9% of the people, unless they have been trained, they cannot understand. But the model through which these languages have been conceived is that the ancient Tamil and ancient Kannada are related to the modern Kannada. We are using a model of continually evolving system in one case, whereas in the other case we are using a model of a death and a birth. That means we are separating in terms of a dichotomous construction. In the case of, this is Darwinian theory of evolutionary model, it is not ours, vast, but still what it makes is it establishes a link between the classical state of a particular language and culture with the contemporary one. And secondly, for many of these languages, it is a living culture. That means the classical languages and their cultures are still lived today. This is something like folklore. Folklore, when the definition of folklore came in Europe in 1835, it was already dead. But our folklore today, it still exists. So there must be a radically different way of understanding and looking at living classical cultures and the so-called quote and unquote non-living classical cultures. Many Indian languages which have been considered as classified are living cultures, and an example of how classicism could be renegotiated continuously in a continually evolving system. I think we have plenty of experiences from Indian literatures which we need to take back into Sanskrit, Prakrit and Pali, because we still, and Apabharamsha too, because we believe that they are dead, in some quarters at least, to renegotiate as to how do we need to look at these languages. Now the last item that I want to say, it is not that classicism and classical language and Sanskrit has not been negotiated at all. In 19th century, many of our earlier writers, without this history of literature, without this theory of classical and non-classical, have already done it. We need to look at 19th century translations of Sanskrit into Indian languages. I have done some work in this, but I will not go into the details. Let me just give one. I would just like to look at Kalidasa's translation of Abhignana Shakuntala in Indian languages. In all Indian languages, when Kalidasa was translated in 19th century, you can look at Lala Sitaram's translation in Hindi. I've also looked at other Indian languages wherever I can read, otherwise I have many people read it for me. They all follow it up. They try to continue the classical link by using either a meter that is compatible with that of Kalidasa, that which the Sanskrit meter has been consistently retained, or has transformed into what could be compatible as a chanda in that particular language. Okay, so that means there is some amount of classicism either retained or classicism reinvented. Now, for in place of Prakrit and in place of where it needs to be explained, they used either prose or they brought in folklore. So Hori, Savan, they all becomes a part and parcel of the 19th century Kalidasa's translation. In addition to that, 19th century added something to that for Kalidasa, which Kalidasa never had. What they did was they wrote songs which actually was as a consequence of the Parsi theatre introducing the songs. This has come actually, basically people argue it has come through the European contact. Consequently, what happened was 19th century classicism was reinvented for the 19th century theatrical public sphere. The chanda for the elite and chanda for all sung in classical ragas, the songs for the newly emerging middle class, they were all sung in songs which are popular at that time. And there's a difference between the chanda. Chanda you can sing and go back. But once you start a song, you have the mukda and then you have the antara and then you should read the end. And then the folk and the common 19th century language was used for the dialogue. This did not happen just to Shakespeare. This did not happen just to Kalidasa. Even Shakespeare was tamed into this structure. So the 19th century classicism negotiation done by the Indian scholars, who probably were not trained in the theoretical framework in which we have been trained and talking today, should remain to us as a model. Those of you who are interested, I have a paper on this. I have a couple of papers on this here. Take a look at it. So I'm again going. 19th century classical negotiation into Indian languages was not done just in the form of a meter. It was done in the form of a music. It was done in the form of a performance. So we are going again from a print textual culture into a performative culture, which is the backbone and the heart of Indian performative Indian writing culture. Having said this, I think we have a model, and we need to look into 19th century negotiations where Orientalists and the Indian scholars negotiated and tried to find solution for the problems that we were considering. I suggest Professor Bharadwaj to undertake a series of seminars, not only trying to take a critique of Sheldon Pollock, but also to see what 19th century Indian scholars did in order to, they were not trained, so many of them were munshis. Aga Kashmiri, who does many of these experiments for Parsi theatre, was not trained. He didn't even know probably English well. So there is a body of material which is still in the archive, which we can take a look at it and see how our ancestors negotiated and what is the lesson that we need to learn at this juncture. The last point, I think, the translation is a very important tool. I believe Sheldon Pollock is not all that popular as we are worried. My own understanding of the Kannada literary situation is that none of the literary historians, literary history is not a very important discipline these days, it has fallen down. None of them are aware of what Sheldon Pollock is saying about Kannada and about Indian culture. In fact, they have not read even what D.R. Nagaraj wrote about the Kannada critical tensions in Kannada literary tradition. So, it is more important that if this position has to be, the positions that Professor Malhotra is trying to take, whether they are acceptable or not, if they have to be debated, the text, the very important thing is that this text should go into Indian language. Let people read it. Let them debate, let them take on one Raju Malhotra taking on the galaxy of Sheldon Pollock and the article is not the right, if at all this is a battle, this is a wada between Mandana Mishra and Shankara, I believe, it should be, but if at all if it's a battle, it becomes a battle of Arjuna and the not Abhimanyu and the others. So it should not become that. So I suggested that text to be translated into different Indian languages. So more and more people will take different positions, fighting for and against what Sheldon Pollock has said, and also probably fight and argue what Professor Raju Malhotra has said and argued in the text. Thank you very much. I think I have tested your questions.
Thank you, Professor Satyanath ji. संस्कृत कमीशन की पहली रिपोर्ट जिस स्कॉलर ने प्रस्तुत उनसे बड़ा अभी तक तो कोई लिंग्विस्ट हुआ नहीं है, प्रोफेसर सुनीति कुमार चटर्जी। उन्होंने इस प्रॉब्लम को 50s में समझ लिया था कि संस्कृत के साथ क्लासिकल लैंग्वेज का जो टैग लगाया जाता है, उन्होंने उसको अपनी रिपोर्ट में एक्सप्लेन किया कि संस्कृत क्लासिकल लैंग्वेज है, मगर उसका सेंस वो नहीं है जो वेस्ट में है। उनका वेस्टर्न क्लासिकल डेफिनेशन कहती है कि लैटिन ग्रीक खत्म होगी, उसके बाद और लैंग्वेज पैदा होगी। संस्कृत क्लासिकल लैंग्वेज इंडियन सेंस में है कि वो क्लासिकल लैंग्वेज है जिसमें कंटिन्यूटी है, जिसमें 1st सेंचुरी में भी लिटरेचर लिखा जा रहा है, 7th सेंचुरी में भी, 18th में भी, 19th में भी, 28th में भी, 21st सेंचुरी में भी। ये एक ऐसी लैंग्वेज है जिसका लिटरेचर कभी भी रुका नहीं है, ब्रेक नहीं है, हमेशा लिखा गया है। और वो लैंग्वेज है जिसको अगर आप कालिदास 1st सेंचुरी के पोएट को पढ़ना चाहें तो आप आज के लैंग्वेज के उस टूल से समझ सकते हैं। आप 19th सेंचुरी के राइटर को समझना चाहते हैं, समझ सकते हैं। तो प्रोफेसर सत्यनाथ जी ने इस इशू को बहुत अच्छी तरह से बताया कि क्लासिकल का टैग संस्कृत के साथ वेस्टर्न सेंस में नहीं चल सकता। और जो वेस्टर्न स्कॉलर्स की कोशिश है कि हम ये कहें कि संस्कृत मर गई और उसके बाद भारतीय भाषाएं चलेंगी, ऐसा नहीं है। तो बहुत अच्छा मुद्दा सत्यनाथ ने कहा, क्योंकि उस मूवमेंट से मैं हूं भारतीय भाषाओं के साथ। जब असमिया भाषा को बांग्ला के खिलाफ अपने आप को अपनी असम में स्थापित करना था, तो लक्ष्मीनाथ बेजबरुआ ने और उनके साथ पूरी टीम ने संस्कृत लिटरेचर को असमिया में ट्रांसलेशन किया, उसके अडॉप्शंस असमिया लैंग्वेज में बनाए। जब हमको कोंकणी भाषा को 8th शेड्यूल में इंक्लूड कराना था, तो हम लोगों ने गोवा से रविंद्र केरेकर, माधवी सरदेसाई जैसे स्कॉलर्स को लेकर हम लोगों ने उसमें संस्कृत के महाभारत को, रामायण को लेकर कोंकणी में लिटरेचर अडॉप्शन तैयार करवाए। ये सभी भारतीय भाषाओं ने किया है कि जब कभी हमको अपनी भारतीय भाषा को साहित्यिक रूप में, सांस्कृतिक रूप में समृद्ध करना है, तो हम उस संस्कृत साहित्य के, उस भाषा के, जैसे रामायण है तो उसमें कृतिवास बांग्ला में भी होगा, उसका तेलुगु अडॉप्शन भी होगा, अलग अलग उसका अडॉप्शन तैयार होंगे। तो वो एक संस्कृत का भारतीय भाषाओं के लिए एक ये रूप है। और दूसरा है कि संस्कृत की जो वोकैबुलरी है, उसकी जो कल्चरल आइडेंटिटी है, जैसे कीहरण, द्रौपदी का कीहरण, अगर वो कन्नड़ लिटरेचर में यूज हुआ है तो बिना संस्कृत के महाभारत की उस कीहरण की घटना के आपको कॉन्सेप्ट समझ ही नहीं सकते। तो वो जो इस तरह के सिंबोलिज्म जो इंडियन कल्चर संस्कृत में है, उनको लेके पूरा इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस ने अपने आप को समृद्ध किया है, उसकी वोकैबुलरी को लिया है, उसके ग्रामेटिकल स्ट्रक्चर को लिया है। इसलिए संस्कृत का जो MIL के साथ जो संबंध है वो दो तरफा है, जो उसको समृद्ध भी करती है और उसको आगे भी बढ़ाती है, मगर साथ ही साथ संस्कृत अपनी परंपराओं को नहीं छोड़ सकती। जो आज से 10,000 साल पहले वैदिक स्वरों के साथ वैदिक मंत्रों का उच्चारण होता था, वो आज भी हमने मेंटेन करके रखा है। वो म्यूजियम में नहीं है, हमारा ओरिजिनलिज्म वो नहीं है, म्यूजियम की चीज नहीं है। इसलिए हम लोग ओरिजिनल स्टडीज ना करके इंडोलॉजिकल स्टडीज कहते हैं, विच इज इन कंटिन्यूटी। मैं रावी जी से अनुरोध करूंगा कि जो इतने विद्वानों ने आपकी किताब पे आक्षेप किए हैं, सजेशन दिए हैं, उनके बारे में आप कुछ बोलें। और उसके बाद क्वेश्चन आंसर जो है, जो आप लोग बैठे हैं, क्योंकि हमको खाना भी खाना है 1:30 पर, तो जो कुछ आपको अपने सजेशन देने हैं, बोलना है, क्वेश्चन आंसर करने हैं, राजीव जी के हाथ है ये मंच, और हम लोग अपने खाने की व्यवस्था करते हैं आप सभी के लिए।
Thank you. So I want to elaborate a little more and also respond to some of the issues raised, which are very nice, and thank you everybody. Whether there is a dichotomy or not, whether we are dealing with what is called the pairs of opposites, whether the word battle is too strong, I will let you decide, but I will tell you a little bit and then you can decide. In Purva Paksh, the idea is not to say this is my view, The idea is to say this is his view and what I think of it. That is the Purva Paksha. And the Uttar Paksha is a rejoinder. Obviously, the Purva Paksha, Uttar Paksha is a dichotomy. It is a system of us, them. It is not a system of we are all happy family singing hands and holding hands and singing. That integration and synthesis comes later. If you do not understand the other very clearly, but the other has been understanding us for 200 years very clearly. So he has a knowledge of himself and us in his framework. I'm still coming to the punchline. If he understands himself and us, we only understand ourselves and we are happy. In that situation, if you go for a merger, you are getting digested into him. You are getting digested into him because you really don't understand what it is that you are dealing with, but he understands what he's dealing with. You understand? You see the point? So we must be, first we have to reach parity of knowledge. We don't have 200 years to study them like they have studied us. They've sent all these Orientalists, but we never sent people to study them. They have sent anthropologists, all of that they've done. They mapped out India, they mapped out the jatis and castes, built all this database. So they keep studying us and we haven't had the same luxury to go around studying them. So given this asymmetry of knowledge, we are not yet ready to do a manthan as equals. The whole idea is to first prepare a home team so we can do the manthan as equals. My idea is to do a manthan, but who on our side is going to do a manthan? I just went to the most traditional centers of learning. I went to the Kanchi Shankaracharya and talked to his scholars, talked to the Shankaracharyas, both senior and junior, for 2 hours on video camera, which we will edit and put up. I went to the Karnataka Sanskrit University, spoke to those people. The former head of the Melkote University was there. Then I went and spoke to Sanskrit, the traditional Sanskrit universities in Chennai. And basically, they agreed that until now they have not had the wherewithal to even learn what the other side is saying. I engaged people, 2 people in Delhi University, several people in the south, for a fee while I was writing this book, to help me understand and discover what exactly the Western Indology people are saying. And after 3 months of activity working for me, they came back and said, we cannot understand what they are writing. One of them said, you give me a 600-page book, but in 3 months I can hardly understand the first 20 pages. So the issue of doing manthan as equal doesn't arise until we raise the standard of our own people and educate them on what the other side is saying. So the first thing they have decided to do, several people, Sanskrit places told me, they will take my book and turn it into several 25 to 50 page little booklets written in Sanskrit. So each argument I'm giving, they want to turn it into Sanskrit, so Sanskrit scholars can read it in a language that they are familiar with. Then it will be a window into reading more and more details about Pollock and others, and that is when we will have a team of people who can even start a manthan as equals. Until we can do that, this idea of manthan will be a kind of unfortunate thing, because under the name of manthan, we just get digested and absorbed into the other side even more quickly. So this is the first point I want to make. Now, regarding this idea that I'm using binary opposites, yes, I'm using binary opposites because I'm doing Purva Paksha of a system which is full of binary opposites. I'll give you some examples. I'm told by, and I'll point out here, a very clear position is taken by Pollock and his whole group that writing comes after Buddha, Panini comes after Buddha, Valmiki comes after Buddha. The reason for bringing these dates after Buddha is to show which affects whom. So it is Buddha as the cause and these things as the effect. These things are the product of Buddhism only if they came after Buddha. So now it is not a question of they can be right and we can be right. You can't be half pregnant. You either are or you're not. That is how it is. Either they are right, in which case all these things are the result of Buddhism, or these things are of ancient origin like we believe. So you have to take a very clear stand. It is a dichotomy, but that is how it is. It has been framed as a dichotomy by them, and you have to understand what their position is as per the Purva Paksha tradition. I can't say, well, I can't convince them to stop being dichotomic. If they would not be in this dichotomy mode, we would be very happy. But that is, the rules have been made. Somebody made the rule of cricket. So you will win or you lose. It is not कि मंथन करेंगे आप दोनों जीत जाएंगे. We don't have that option. So the rules have been made. This kind of a discourse we must first understand. Once we succeed in toppling this, we can replace the world with our own discourse. जहाँ पर ये dichotomy होएगी नहीं, and I wish we could someday achieve that. But we can't wish it and bypass all the process needed along the way. So another very strong position of Pollock is that oral tradition was incapable of bringing progress. Orality was just mumbo-jumbo hymns being recited by Brahmins, and there was no progress being made. Progress comes with writing. Writing comes with Buddhists. It all works as a system, as a theory. Progress is impossible in oral tradition, it is only possible in writing. This writing is brought by Buddhists. This grammar comes after Buddhists, and therefore Buddhist intervention, which is against the Vedic tradition, is responsible for any progress coming. So this is either true or false. Our debaters are full of arguing and refuting your argument. It is not that we kind of are in between. You have a proposition, the Nyaya says, okay, you got this proposition, I am going to falsify it. It is a dichotomy. To falsify the other position is a dichotomy, very, very clear in our tradition. We are not ashamed of taking on these things. So then another position that has been taken by the other side is that this Shastra, Vedas, Shastra, Kavya are not the same. They're not in harmony. They're not in harmony. There is mutual tension between Shastra and Kavya. And Kavya is into the Vyavarika realm. This dichotomy between Paramarthika and Vyavarika is very central in Pollock's work. He cites Vico, the 17th century Italian philosopher who actually influenced Marx. And the whole Marx dialectic, thesis, antithesis and all that is inspired by Vico. So he quotes Vico, uses his original Latin categories and all, and says that we apply these categories to understand the Vedic Paramarthika and Vyavarika, and then very quickly dismisses the Paramarthika realm as something which is not very useful, and the Vyavarika realm is what is useful. And Shastra, he says, so there is a dichotomy in his work all the way. In fact, I am arguing the opposite. I am saying there is something called integral unity, where Paramarthika and Vyavarika are inseparable. So I am not supporting that dichotomy. I am giving the terminology of dichotomy which the opponent uses, because I have to first explain what he is saying. Then I can give my argument. So I say this is the dichotomy between Paramarthika and Vyavarika, which I don't accept. So I give my counter arguments. And then the idea that Shastra, their idea is that Shastra is incapable of advancement, progress, innovation, creativity, because all Shastras are basically stuck in Vedic metaphysics. The Shastras are stuck in Vedic metaphysics, so whatever the Shastra may be, it can only derive based on Vedic assumptions. And since it is based on Vedic assumptions, it cannot be free from those assumptions. This is a very clear position. Now we can argue that we can either say we accept it, in which case he says that unless you reject this whole Shastra and Vedic tradition, you can't advance as a civilization. Or as I argue, that we give many examples and evidences of huge advancements, progress, creativity from within our Shastra tradition, and the Shastra is hardly static. And this, so the links between Shastra and Vedas are being used to claim that Shastras cannot advance. I argue this. And the statement that Shastra and Kavya are split up, and the Kavya is the route to freedom. The Kavya is the route to freedom and not Shastra. I contest that. I also contest this artificial binary divide between Shastra and Kavya. So in fact my whole book is against the binary divide that we are being forced into. But first I have to talk about it. First I have to say there is a battle. There is a battle which has been, we are now on the defensive, unfortunately. We are on the defensive. And we have to understand how the battle is being fought, what are the rules of the game, and then we can fight back. And then we can be in a situation where we can take charge of the discourse and we can put it in our own terminology. We don't have to use that terminology. We hope to be able to do that. The mere fact that I am here speaking in English is indicated that much of my audience, I'm trying to influence the audience of the English speaking elite. because they are the ones who are giving millions of dollars grants. So I can't believe that you consider Sheldon Pollock unimportant when Indian billionaires are showering him with millions of dollars, and he's going to translate 500 volumes, 10 times what Max Miller did. And if you said he's not important, then we certainly know Max Miller was very important. And so he's doing 10 times as much is obviously very important. And the government showers him with Padma Shri, must be important. Conrad said that in this major international conferences he's a celebrity, must be important. Whether Kannada people know about him is maybe they don't know. But Anant Murthy and Girish Karnad, he says that they are his greatest friends and they are his greatest allies. Now they are important Kannada people. And Bhairappa I talked to. Bhairappa said very clearly, I had conversation with Bhairappa, a Kannada major figure, who said that Pollock and these other guys are all of the same left communist lineage, very solidly in that side, and they have influenced and they have actually caused a lot of harm to people like Bhairappa, because Bhairappa could have been far more important in the whole literary scene in terms of the public appreciation globally, had it not been for these guys stealing much of the limelight for him. So I don't think that you can dismiss him as somebody not important. And plus, when you look at the reason I wrote this book is in the first introduction chapter. Sringeri Mutt was in the process of turning over its international teaching of Adi Shankara to a set of chairs in Ivy Leagues in America, where Sheldon Pollock was the head of the committee in charge of selecting the chairs. Now, if Sringeri Mutt is about 4 weeks away to outsource its whole legacy to this man under his control, how can you say he's not so important? So I don't know what else it would take if the traditional Matha had almost gone, if the government of India had already given all the awards, if the Vaishya community, so you look at the Kshatriya, which is the government, has given awards. If you look at the Brahmin, which is the Sringeri, which is about to be gone, or at that time, and if you look at the Vaishya, which is the billionaires giving money, so if they've got the Vaishya, Brahmin and Kshatriya on their side, I don't know what is left. So I don't believe that we can be complacent and say, okay, these guys are not important. I think they are important. In fact, this is the equivalent of the East India Company Orientalists. This is the American Orientalists come back, and so I call them Charvaks 2.0, because the Charvaks are back, more weaponized, more armed, more funded. Now, the issue of terminology, yes, I could find other terms than battle, but I like the term battle. I thought very long and hard. I did not want a postmodernist, boring, one more postmodernist kind of term, problematizing the issues on Western, some boring term. I just didn't want it. I am in it for a battle, because to me it is a battle to take the adhikar back. It is a battle to get Sringeri Mutt to commit. See, the battle is still not over. I mean, I don't know if Sringeri Mutt reaction, what his reaction will be. They may say, who are you? It's our money. We are going to give it to this guy. Then obviously he'll be even more powerful. I don't know if I've convinced them. I hope I have. All I can tell you is that 15, 16 months ago, a deal was supposed to have already been signed, implemented, money put in there, announced, chair appointed, and it hasn't happened so far. So maybe that's a good sign. Maybe this book has kind of stopped them a little bit. So it is a battle to stop those things. And then the plan was that once Sringeri Mutt has been tied up, they'll go to the other mutts and the various, all kinds of mutts in the South India, and Peethams and so on, and try to get one of them, each Ivy League will tie up with one of them. And so the whole future of these mutts will be represented by the Western ideology. This will be absolutely traumatic for us, and therefore it is a battle for me. I mean, very battle with real time, with the huge people, a battle. If people are firing at me angrily, these kind of people firing at me angrily, wanting to stop the book, how can I say it's not a battle? There is even to stop the book battle going on, you see. So, and people, so now, what you have, whether you call it battle, whatever you call it, what you have is a solid nexus of power which is outside of India, these guys run conferences, as Professor Bhardwaj said, and as Conrad else said. These guys run conferences, they run the journals, they are the gatekeepers of what gets published, who will referee, whether your paper gets in or not. And Indians are sort of second tier, who are traditionally loyal are second tier, and of course those who sold out are top tier. We have a lot of those guys. We have a lot of those guys looking for their money, looking for their prestige and patronage and so on. And so, if you want to break this, no colonizer has voluntarily gone in history. Colonizers don't just sort of say, okay, I was here for a picnic, I've eaten enough, and I'll go pack my bags and go home. Without a battle, there is no such thing as decolonization. And a battle is an intellectual battle. It is a battle where you say, I reject this portrayal of me, I reject this Aryan theory. That's a battle. To fight the Aryan theory is a battle. So, the issues that I'm raising here, whether it's the relationship of Vedic and Buddhism, whether it's the chronology of Ramayana, whether it is the business of Vyavarika, Paramarthika can't be separated and one of them cannot be dismissed, whether it's the value of the oral tradition, whether it's the creativity in the Vedas, creativity in the Shastras, whether it's the relationship between tight coupling between Shastra and Kavya, all of these, each one of them is a battlefront that you have to understand with respect. With respect, I keep saying in this book, with respect, you have to understand the position of the other side and then give an important response. I will quote the dedication to of this book to address the concern that maybe I'm too much fighting against the opponents. So, this is a very interesting dedication. Dedicated to our Purva Paksha and Uttar Paksha debating tradition. With gratitude to the Purva Paksha opponents, who I learned from. So I'm crediting my opponents that I learned from. May we engage in this intellectual yajna with mutual respect. That is my dedication. So I don't think that I'm coming at this battle as some kind of a hate guy. And so many people who looked at this, told me that you are so respectful to the opponent. You're constantly going on saying, these are brilliant scholars, they're very, very hardworking, they have a lot we can learn from, that we just disagree on some of their premises, we have counter positions, that doesn't mean there's anything personal. Constantly in my talks I keep saying, actually they're waking us up. They're doing us a favor, because it is they who have are now encouraging us to do this research which we should have done long ago. And a critic can also be your friend because he's making you aware of things that you did not notice before. So I'm actually quite appreciative of this. And we have also sent more than enough invites. I went and met Sheldon Pollock so many times in New York, had so much coffee with him, very friendly. I have written saying, let's have a friendly discussion. In fact, in November, I wrote to him that I'm willing to put aside publishing of this book if he would like to have video discussion with me in a very friendly way. Then a series of video discussions may substitute. This is after working so hard, book is ready, it's gone to the publisher. Even then, I thought that the idea of a dialogue, a conversation live, which is videotaped, may actually be merged more. And I even wrote that if you are willing to do a series of video discussions with a neutral moderator, it will be so important to bring these ideas together. Maybe we learn from each other. And then I can write a book, or maybe we can jointly author a book. I have said that in writing, and he said that is not something we could do at this point in time, and maybe later we could have an email, moderated debate after my book is out. So I have gone beyond what anybody on their side would ever go to invite us. I have invited so many times, so many people to come and have conversations with us. So I don't think I am at all apologetic that I am ready for battle. That's my position. So I will conclude and throw it open for questions.
इससे पहले कि हम लोग देखिए हमारे पास अभी 20 मिनट हैं जिसमें हम लोग कुछ लोगों की सजेशंस या वो ले सकते हैं। जो बोलना चाहते हैं प्लीज कम फॉरवर्ड बिकॉज कैमरा इज ऑन। नो लेक्चर्स, only questions from Rajiv ji if anybody wants. Yeah, no, it's okay.
नीचे से नीचे से
हेलो
Hello sir, I'm Vaibhav. I'm studying in Law Faculty, Delhi University. I just wanted to ask you a question that whenever the government initiates or takes any step regarding promotion of Sanskrit, be it in Kendriya Vidyalayas, the left-leaning media always terms it as saffronization of Bhagavatam. And the debate is like ended up in a very sad manner, so we are not having a equal debate, but it goes down to saffronization of Bhagavatam. Sir, how can we counter this claim of the media or the left liberals?
So, in this book, I raised this issue of whether this Sanskrit is elitist, whether it is anti, minorities and so on, women and Sudras and so on. And I've got quite a lot of evidence here. Evidence compiled from Sanskrit Commission, the first Sanskrit Commission. They produced a lot of good work on this. Sanskrit Bharati, many different scholars, to give some statistical facts that this is not saffronization. In fact, Sanskrit Bharati, Jammu Krishna Shastri told me that some of their most successful spoken Sanskrit camps and so Sanskrit movements are in the slums, and a lot of Muslims are doing very well in the spoken Sanskrit, some of them winning awards.
With this pattern, do you want to churn the butter out, or you want to only cook the batter where it doesn't exist? So my question, just listen.
Yeah.
The whole of the teachers will be communist, French people, they have their own ideology about history, culture, philosophy. You are taking also so many things, Shastra, Purpaksha, other things. You have taught so many things, very nice. Buddhism, again you are bringing a new issue of Buddhism in it. So my question is that with this battle, do you want to come to the reality, or do you want to create the conflict which does not exist in the modern purview? It doesn't exist, and you want to generate it afresh.
So the question is, am I creating false conflicts which don't exist? Is that the question? Is that the question? मतलब इतनी लंबी बात की, is the bottom line, is Mr. Malhotra creating conflicts which don't exist? If that's the question, I can answer it. Whether the conflicts exist or not, you read the book and see for yourself. If somebody says the oral tradition is no good and the tradition says it's valuable, that's a conflict. If somebody says that Buddhism is in conflict with Vedas, but people on this dais have said that is not so, that is a conflict. So if somebody says that Ramayana is oppressive, it oppresses lower caste and it oppresses against Muslims and it oppresses women, and the traditional Ramayana scholar doesn't agree, that is a conflict. So ये conflict हमने नहीं create किए. The conflicts exist in books which some of our people are blind and afraid, don't want to acknowledge. वो बात और है. So I'm putting the spotlight on pointing out conflicts that are written in black and white. Some people are afraid of understanding the conflict because they're so scared of it. They would rather keep pretending that conflict है ही नहीं. आप हमको मत बताएं, because नहीं बताएंगे तो हमारे मन में तो conflict होएगा ही नहीं. आप हमको उसके बारे में कुछ सिखा देंगे तो फिर हमको we have to deal with it, which is very troubling to us. So they are concerned more about somebody putting the spotlight on conflicts, not that I'm creating any of those conflicts.
राजीव जी और पहली बात फैसला राजीव जी ने बहुत क्लियरली अपने आप को डिफेंड किया है, उसको कुछ ज़्यादा कहने की जरूरत नहीं है, इसलिए मैं कहूँगा नहीं, और मैं जानता हूँ कि आप आगे इंतजार कर रहे हैं तो मैं उसके लिए पहुँच जाऊँगा। लेकिन एक बात मैं जरूर कहना चाहूँगा कि नज़मा हफ्सुल्ला और मेरे साथी प्रोफेसर सत्यनाथ आपके जो शब्द बैठे हैं उस पर ऑब्जेक्शन किया, लेकिन ये ऑब्जेक्शन मुझे बहुत अच्छा नहीं लगा, क्योंकि मार्था नस्बॉम ने आपकी अन्य किताबों और ऐसे लोगों के बारे में जो आजकल उनका अपोजिशन कर रहे हैं, उनके बारे में कहा इट्स ए वॉर, इट्स ए वॉर. So we should also, I won't mind if a stronger word, of course you are very humble and your humility as an Indian makes you say battle. I say it's a war. It's a war for the existence. It's a war for the existence of all the scholars who are working in this area. If you look at Wendy Doniger, if you look at Paul Pollock, Kripal and other fellows, they are really not with us on this at all. They consider what they are saying is a war against all the Indologists, what you call insider Indologists. So we have to really give them back in the same words. In the same words. All that you are saying is basically a very small, very small things. You are saying that the right to understand or right of individual scholars must be blamed against right, must be balanced against right of culture and communities. That is all we are saying. We are saying that they as a scholar should not criticize but not define other religions. We don't mind criticism. Criticism is welcome. But then when they try to define our religion, then there is a problem. In fact, you are right when you said in your speech today that we have to prepare a community of people who have to be like this, who have to defend us. You have not to be alone. You have not to be a small group, but a large nation doing this. Rajivji, I tried to do this in a Hindi-speaking university in Udaipur. I wrote for them in Hindi. In fact, most of the Paul Cartwrights, Wendy Doniger, Kripals, their originals were translated by me in Hindi. And I tried to show how the whole concept is a wrong concept and how you and your followers are the right people and we have to defend them. But what happened was that even the Hindi-speaking people who had never heard of this debate, when I brought it to their notice, they took offense to it. They thought that I am saying what Paul Pollock is saying about Ganesha. And of course, I am a convict in the FIR. An FIR has been registered. The press was very supportive. But still, FIR is there. I have to defend myself. So we don't have to really so much worry about the foreigners as we have to worry about our own people. Thank you very much.
इसी बहाने प्रोफेसर अशोक बोहरा जी को अखबारों में, मीडिया में एक हफ्ते तक, क्योंकि जैसा आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा कि हम विदेशी जो हमारे संस्कृति का डिस्टॉर्शन कर रहे हैं उनसे भी हमको बचाना है, पर हिंदुस्तान के अपने समाज के अंदर जो लोग छुट्टे दिमाग के संकीर्ण लोग, प्रोफेसर अशोक बोहरा जो कि जिंदगी भर एकेडमिक्स की बात करता रहा, उसके खिलाफ उदयपुर यूनिवर्सिटी में FIR होना, उसके नाम वारंट इशू करना, वो इस हिंदुस्तान जैसे कुछ मूर्खों के देश में, कुछ मूर्ख हैं हमारे बीच में, जो उस बात को समझते नहीं है कि वो बात क्या कह रहे हैं, और उनको कोर्ट केस में, पुलिस केस में, हमने जान के आपको इसीलिए अध्यक्ष बनाया कि ये हम लोग धर्म युद्ध कर रहे हैं, पर उस धर्म युद्ध में सत्य का युद्ध है, उसमें हमको सावधान रहना है अपने बीच के उन संकीर्ण लोगों से भी जो कि हमारे मिशन को बदनाम करके इस देश को समाप्त करना चाहते हैं और उन कौम नस्लों के हाथ में खेलना चाहते हैं।
I am practically every day at the office of Buddhism. That number I have somewhere. Of course, I will not go into this. For me, only a literary language. But the thing is okay with you. This number 11, 23, 26. 80, No, that's someone else. This one. Aditya Goel is the manager of this bibliography. No, this is 9-1. Hello? Yes, before I'm speaking, I'm thrown into this conversation. I don't know what this is about, but anyway.
I'm a big follower of Buddhism. Can I touch on this?
Don't touch anything.
This message.
Okay, you can do me a favor, you open these. Open these to make it easier for you. That will be useful.
Okay.
Just open to the title page.
I already have this, but I want to have the slide.
Yeah, I agree. But no, today is a bit difficult tomorrow.
Can you do this?
Well, I would normally be in the Darya Bank in the campus today. But
Sir, side से ये
somewhere else, somewhere with a nicer background or something. Yes, this morning is very good. 11 o'clock. Well, that's the thing. Traffic is really bad. Morning is very bad. The people here can tell me where it is. No, there's some people here around me. Phone I'm not talking to. They can explain to me where it is. Yeah, okay. Yeah?
नाम तो मेरे को भी नहीं पता, आप बता दीजिए तो कर देंगे।
Yeah. Right. Okay, excellent.
But until you have to write a review.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And on your part, of course, I would be interested in knowing more about what you're going to ask.
I'm a big fan of yours.
You want to eat lunch? Let's eat lunch.
Yeah.
Happy lunch time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. See you tomorrow.
हाँ यार इवेंट्स में सर अरे यार खाली है इसलिए नहीं बहुत ज़्यादा कहाँ यार
Please write a review.
चलो ठीक है मैं बाद में बात करता हूँ
जल्दी करो यार
नहीं नंबर दे